Tell me if this sounds familiar. You've got that one friend who's making six figures, maybe more, but they're still clipping coupons like it's 2008, driving a car that's older than some of your relationships, and genuinely stressed about spending $15 on lunch. Meanwhile, someone else you know is living paycheck to paycheck, but somehow always has the latest phone and designer sneakers. We've all been taught that money changes people, that wealth inevitably leads to extravagance and showing off. But here's what's fascinating. Some of the wealthiest people you'll ever meet are walking around looking like they shop exclusively at thrift stores. Today, we're diving deep into the psychology behind why some people act poor when they're actually rich. And trust me, the reasons are way more complex than just being cheap or humble. According to research from wealth psychology studies, approximately 60% of millionaires report deliberately living below their means despite having significant wealth. And the psychological mechanisms driving this behavior reveal something profound about how we relate to money, identity, and security. Let's start with something that sounds almost contradictory: wealth trauma conditioning. Sounds fancy, right? But this is real. Many people who accumulate wealth, especially first-generation wealthy individuals, carry what psychologists call scarcity imprinting from their formative years. If you grew up watching your parents stress about bills, witnessed financial instability, or experienced genuine poverty, your brain literally wires itself to anticipate loss. Even when the bank account says you're safe, the neural pathways formed during those lean years keep firing warning signals. It's like your mind is constantly preparing for the other shoe to drop. You're not just saving money, you're building a psychological fortress against a threat that no longer exists. But here's where it gets interesting. This isn't always dysfunction. Some of these behaviors represent adaptive wisdom, a recognition that financial circumstances can change rapidly. The 2008 financial crisis taught a whole generation that stability is an illusion. So when someone who's wealthy continues to live modestly, they might not be traumatized. They might just be playing a longer game than the rest of us can see.
But here's the thing nobody talks about: identity preservation anxiety. This is the fear that wealth will fundamentally alter who you are as a person. Think about it. We've all absorbed cultural narratives about rich people being disconnected, shallow, or morally compromised. Movies, music, even our everyday conversations are filled with stories about how money corrupts. So when you suddenly find yourself with wealth, there's this terrifying question: will I become one of them? Acting poor becomes a form of identity protection, a way to signal to yourself and others that money hasn't changed you. You're still the same person who struggled, who remembers what it was like, who hasn't lost touch with reality. There's actually research in social psychology about this phenomenon called status incongruence management, where people deliberately present themselves in ways that contradict their actual economic status to maintain psychological continuity with their past selves. But plot twist, this can backfire spectacularly. By refusing to adjust your lifestyle at all, you might actually be creating a different kind of identity crisis, one where you're neither fully comfortable with who you were, nor accepting of who you've become.
Now, here's something that'll mess with your head: temporal existentialism around wealth. Basically, some wealthy people who act poor are operating with an acute awareness of life's impermanence and money's ultimate meaninglessness. They've done the math and realized that at the end, you can't take it with you. So why perform wealth? Why play a game where the only prize is more anxiety about losing what you have? This connects to what philosophers and psychologists call hedonic adaptation, the proven reality that we quickly normalize any new level of comfort or luxury. That rush you get from a new car? Gone in 3 months. The satisfaction from a bigger house? Fades faster than you'd think. People who maintain simple lifestyles despite wealth have often consciously recognized this trap. They're not depriving themselves, they're refusing to get on the treadmill where each new purchase only resets the baseline for what feels normal. But here's the kicker. Is this enlightenment, or is it another form of control anxiety? Sometimes what looks like minimalist wisdom is actually an inability to enjoy the present because you're so focused on protecting an uncertain future. The line between mindful living and fear-based restriction can be razor thin.
Let's be real for a second about something uncomfortable: performative relatability.
Some wealthy people maintain poor-looking lifestyles because it gives them social camouflage and moral credibility. In an era of massive wealth inequality, being visibly rich makes you a target for judgment, resentment, and constant requests. But if you drive a Honda and shop at regular stores, you can move through the world without that friction. You can still relate to complaints about prices, still participate in conversations about financial stress, without the conversation dying when people remember your actual net worth. This is what sociologists call class passing, and it serves real psychological functions beyond just avoiding awkwardness. It maintains social bonds that might otherwise be strained by wealth differences. But before you think this is purely strategic manipulation, consider this. Many people doing this genuinely feel more comfortable in modest settings. Their wealth might be recent or unexpected, and luxury environments actually create anxiety rather than pleasure. They're not faking being comfortable with less. They genuinely are more comfortable with less, even though they could afford more.
And here's where it gets weirder. Some people maintain modest lifestyles as a form of what psychologists call continued deservingness testing. Basically, they haven't fully internalized that the wealth is real, permanent, or earned. Maybe it came from luck, inheritance, or a windfall rather than gradual accumulation. So they keep living like it could disappear tomorrow, because psychologically, they haven't fully accepted it as theirs. There's research showing that people who experience sudden wealth versus gradual accumulation process their financial identity completely differently. Lottery winners and inheritance recipients often struggle with what's called wealth incongruence, where their self-concept hasn't caught up to their financial reality. Acting poor becomes a way to stay grounded in the identity they understand while they figure out who they're becoming. But plot twist, sometimes this provisional attitude toward wealth becomes permanent. Years can pass, the money can grow, and the person is still living like they're one mistake away from poverty because they never gave themselves permission to fully step into their new reality.
Here's the truth that makes all of this more complicated. There's no clear line between financial prudence and psychological dysfunction, between mindful simplicity and fear-based restriction, between authentic values and performative modesty. The person clipping coupons despite having millions might be exhibiting wise stewardship or unresolved trauma, or both simultaneously. And maybe that ambiguity is exactly the point. We want clean categories, simple explanations for why people do what they do with money. But money touches everything: our childhood experiences, our deepest fears, our sense of who we are and who we want to become, our relationships, our values, our mortality. When someone wealthy chooses to live modestly, they're making a statement about all of those things at once. The real question isn't whether acting poor when you're rich is right or wrong, healthy or dysfunctional. The real question is whether the choice is conscious or compulsive, whether it's serving your actual values or just running on autopilot from old programming. Both the wealthy person living in calculated simplicity and the one enjoying their resources fully can be equally authentic, as long as they've examined why they're making the choices they're making. If this deep dive into the psychology of money and identity got you thinking, hit that subscribe button, because we explore the hidden psychology behind human behavior every single week. Drop a comment telling me, would you live differently if money wasn't a concern, or would you keep things basically the same? Let's keep this conversation going.